Hey y'all, it is Gemini Jazz and I'm here with another video. Okay, so today we are going to get into anxiety in the birth chart. Yes. Okay, so first we have to talk about what anxiety is. So to get into it, anxiety is basically an overactive sympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system is the system that basically controls your fight or flight, and it becomes active, or it stays active in normal situations such as scrolling on your Instagram or Facebook, reading your emails, going outside, meeting new people, going to work, answering the phone. The regular situations where you should not be in a fight or flight, stance, but you are. So it basically it's the opposite of your parasympathetic nervous system, which is what your body's supposed to be in the majority of the time. So the parasympathetic nervous system is your relaxed state. So that is the system that allows us to digest our food. It's the system that we are in when we're sleeping. And so if you think about it, that's why anxiety creates inflammation in the body, because we are unable to digest our food when we're in the sympathetic nervous system, when it's overactive, when we're in that fight or flight state, because we don't digest our food in that state. And if you're using a lot of the time of the day in that state, you're not digesting your food, you're not breathing properly, and so on and so forth. So we'll get into that a little bit more. But moving on, there are a few anxiety markers that are found in the birth chart that you can pay attention to. And there are a few that are affiliated with the adrenal activation. And basically that's with the crisis and fear aspect of things. So cardinal signs, they are affiliated with the adrenal system. So if you think about Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, and Aries, if you have a lot of placements in these signs, you can be really prone to having anxiety. And especially if you have a lot in Cancer, because Cancer, they handle fear, anxiety, confrontation. They handle those things a little bit differently. And because if you think about Cancer, think of the crab, they're very protective of their surroundings. So, they do the little, so it's kind of like that push off kind of thing. And they don't deal directly with conflict. So when conflict directly comes to them, they deal with it in an indirect way. And that is what can create anxiety, especially if you have a lot of placements in Cancer or in other cardinal signs. So another one would be, let's talk about an aspect, right? Talk about the aspect. So we have Sun with Mars. So if you have your Sun with Mars, especially in a square or an opposition, or even conjunct, actually. So if you have your Sun with Mars, any sign that sits in the same degree as the Sun, or opposition, or even a square, it basically can heighten, the Sun will heighten that planet's energy. So Mars is the initiator, the action packed. And so if you have that aspect in your chart, you're going to be more prone to a lot of energy. This can also include a lot of anxious energy. And if you're not having an outlet for that, it can create anxiety. Another aspect will be your Mercury with your Sun. That's me. So I am a Gemini Sun with Mercury in Gemini conjunct, basically. So that basically is going to exacerbate the Mercury energy. Like I mentioned before, that is a combust, right? So it's what they call a combust. So the Sun is combusting the Mercury, is just creating more mental energy. And as you know, Mercury, or you may not know, but Mercury rules the brain. It rules the nervous system as well. And so when you have all of this high impact energy with the planet that rules the brain, you have all of these overactive thoughts. You have a lot of overanalyzing. It can get a bit much, taking it from experience, right? So it's basically, if you don't have an outlet for that, I just learned, recently in the last year or so, that helps me to journal, and it also helps me to talk things out. So talk therapy is really good for people with this placement, as well as journaling and physical activity. So what I like to do is sit out in the, nature, sit outside, sit in the wilderness, whatever, and journal at the same time, or, either or, but just to get that energy out some kind of way. Another one would be Sun squaring Pluto, right? So like I mentioned, the sun and what it does to a planet. So Pluto is about death, transformation, and all these things. So when you have that, especially when it's in a square, this is an indicator of childhood trauma. So these people that have it, they have been conditioned to, like, PTSD. They have been conditioned since childhood to basically deal with trauma. And so you see that in birth charts, and you see that behavior. They kind of behave, and they kind of function as if they've experienced, or as if they have PTSD. Okay, so another one would be Mercury with Mars, or Mercury with Uranus, right? So like I mentioned, the brain, is Mercury, right? So when you have Mercury with Mars, it's a lot of action, a lot of just quickness. It's fire. It's just impactful. And when you also have Mercury with Uranus, it's basically Uranus it's very unpredictable. It's very rebellious. So it's a lot of fast thinking, fast talking. And if you notice, a lot of people with this placement, they talk really fast, or sometimes their mouth can't really catch up with their brain. So they stumble over their words, or they stutter a lot. And this because of this placement. And so that creates this a lot of intense and strong energy, mental energy, and you also need a mental outlet for that, and as well as a good physical outlet to maintain that balance. Another aspect would be Mercury with Saturn. So as you know, Saturn is a planet of structure, structure and discipline and whatnot. And when you have Mercury, which is mental, you're going to have this placement with, especially like a square, an opposition, or even a conjunction, is going to bring feelings of not knowing what you're talking about, or not appearing intelligent. So you will have fears of people seeing this in you, and this will create social anxiety. So you will have a fear of being around people, or fear of talking to people, right? So that's another one. And also we have Neptune, right? So if you have Neptune and it's in a transit with the moon or the sun, or even with Mercury, this can bring like a free floating type of energy where you are always expecting something to happen. And that's because Neptune is creating that illusion that something's going to happen, when in fact nothing's going to happen. You're just creating these narratives because of the placement that you have with Neptune. Especially if you have Neptune in your 12th house, that can make you really highly sensitive. So you might feel things that really aren't necessarily like a trigger. It's really not something that's putting you in crisis, but you feel a lot of energy because of that. And in your environment, you might have a lot of empathy and whatnot. So you take on a lot of energy, and that in itself can create anxiety. And so let's move on to some tips, right? So one thing that with me when suffering anxiety, what I do, I basically have these thoughts. I tell myself to stop, because anxiety basically is telling you that you're not present. You are either trying to change the past, or you're too focused on the future. You're not present. So I tell myself to stop. I remind myself where I am, what I'm doing, what I'm wearing, every little detail of what's going on in that moment. And then I ask myself, okay, is this thought true? Yes or no? Will this thought be valid in a week? Will it be valid in a year? So on and so forth. And then you just kind of bring yourself back. You pull yourself back and you take control of your mind. Another thing is to practice relaxation and rest. It calms down the nervous system to actually practice your diaphragm breathing. So, place a hand on your chest and a hand on your belly, and practice breathing from your stomach. You know how babies, they breathe and their bellies go up? That's how we should be breathing, and not the chest breathing, where it's short of breath in your chest. It's actually from your belly. That's another one, because it creates that, it puts you back in that parasympathetic state. Another tip that you can have is to make sure you have proper nutrition, because as I mentioned, anxiety creates that inflammation in your body, and inflammation is just another, like a fuel. It feeds anxiety. So make sure you're having proper nutrition, you're doing an anti-inflammatory diet of some sort, or you're taking anti-inflammatory herbs like I do on a consistent basis to keep myself, you know, as healthy as possible. And also, when you're breathing, keep in mind that you extend your breath. So you might inhale for 3 seconds, but exhale for 6. So practice those things as just a few little tips and tricks. And if you have any questions, if you would want your birth chart to be analyzed and looked at, and we can look at some different things that could be possibly going on with you, please feel free to reach out to me. I hope this video has been helpful for you guys, and have a beautiful, beautiful day.